Welcome to the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler. Legs, what's up, man? You know what? Can I just say one thing to start?
Yeah.
We have been treated to, I think, 6 minus the fourth quarter of Game 2 of the Pacers Celtics series. We have been treated to 6 really good basketball games, and we're sitting here and there's 2 teams that are up 3-0. And you look, and we're going to talk Wolves and Mavs to start, but you look at both these series, and it very easily could be 2-1, flipped in either series.
No doubt.
And I think we should start with just the way that the Mavs have finished and closed games. I think in some ways this is what Nico Harrison, Mark Cuban, Jason Kidd all envisioned when they traded for Kyrie Irving, having 2 closers at your disposal in big games against elite teams.
Yeah, well, first, and I don't know, have you done the research on this? Has anybody told you this? Because I haven't looked it up, but when's the last time we had 2 conference finals over 3-0 at the same time?
I think 5 of the last 6 or something. It was in our notes this morning. I'll get it.
Because to think we're potentially looking at 2 sweeps here. I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't be shocked if either of these teams that were down 3-0 won a game. I mean, just the way that it's hard to beat a team 4 times and to make as many big plays that you have to make to do that down the stretch. And like you said, as close as 5 out of these 6 games have been, not going to be shocked. I really wouldn't be shocked by it. I think Dallas and Boston both have high incentive to get this over with. But to think that we're 3-0 with the amount of drama that we've had, the amount of big possessions we've had that have all leaned in one direction in both of these series, in terms of the teams that have made the absolute plays that they had to make. For Dallas, you saw it on full display at a higher level than you ever have seen it in Game 3. This is what it's all about, having 2 guys this good offensively and what they're capable of doing. And it doesn't really matter what you throw at them, they have an answer. But the most important part of all of this, JJ, there are a lot of tandems in this league of star players offensively, where you look, these are 2 dudes offensively, top tier, top of the food chain type guys. Doesn't mean that every tandem we have in this league embraces big spots offensively and shot making the way that these 2 guys do. You've got 2 of them. And what a luxury, man. And what pressure that has taken off of Luka to have Kyrie playing like this and to play the way that he did at the end of this game. It's incredible, and how frustrating for Minnesota, because their whole year, they've hung their hat on the fact that even if they had some rough shooting nights, and clearly Cat's struggling right now, Anthony Edwards, hasn't been great in this series. They've been able to figure out a way to overcome that anyway, because we've got this defense that just is able to corral teams and force what we want and dictate terms. You can't dictate terms to Luka and Kyrie. You can't dictate terms, man. They're dictating terms because they're that good, and they could score from anywhere on the floor. And the threat of scoring from anywhere on the floor opens up the other stuff that they do too. So just sit back and enjoy what you're watching, because this is really, really special. There's been a lot of praise thrown their way, a lot of stuff people think's hyperbole. I don't think any of it's hyperbole. This is about as good as it gets that we've ever seen in terms of offensive talent paired together at that spot, both of whom are guards that handle the ball a lot. This is as good as it gets, and you're seeing it on full display, and they've needed every bit of it to get up 3-0 in this series.
Real quick. So when I said 5 of the last 6 conference finals, a team has gone up 3-0, but this is the second straight year that both conference finals started out 3-0. So
both were 3-0 last year. I already forgot that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Denver swept, and then Boston had to come back from down 3-0. So Luka and Kyrie, they've each scored 30 or more in the last 3 games. Talk about the closing a game. They combined for 21 points in the fourth quarter. Kyrie had 14 of his 33 in the fourth quarter. I think the big thing, and I don't necessarily want to have this discussion yet because the series is not over, but the big thing for the Mavs and their championship hopes is they have figured out ways throughout these playoffs, whether it's been against the Clippers, whether it's been against OKC, to win when Luka has not been at his best. Can you win a championship if your best player is not at his best? I think it's really hard to do, no matter how good the ancillary pieces are, no matter how good your second star is, no matter how good your role players are playing. I think it's hard to do that. Well, Luka, over his last 5, a shade under 32 points, 8.6 rebounds, 9.4 assists, 2 steals, and his shooting splits are 50, 45, 88. 50% for the field, 45% from 3, 88 from the line. Mavs, of course, have won all 5 of those games. So all of a sudden, and you and I were texting this morning, all of a sudden, it feels like going into this series, you and I both kind of had Dallas as the favorites in this. All of a sudden, it feels like, hey, man, Dallas can win this whole thing. Yeah. Dallas can win this year, with this team, an NBA championship.
Few things have happened here that, I've liked them all along, but I also thought, my statement I kept making on them was they can get to the conference finals as long as they don't play Denver. Like, I kept saying that because that's kind of how I felt. If they stay out of their bracket, and they did, and I thought, okay, well, then they can, but I didn't think they'd be playing Minnesota here. I thought they'd be playing Denver in this spot, and I thought it would probably end there. I'm talking going back weeks ago. But what has happened now as these playoffs have gone on, and Luka, obviously, early on, I thought physically didn't look right. Lou Dort was mauling him, wearing him down, didn't look particularly right. What's happened in this round is he's starting to now consistently get enough lift on his deep shot that the timing of his release is back on point. And that you expect it to go in now. There was a time there early in the playoffs, I didn't expect it to go in. It did, because it didn't look right. He didn't look like he was timing it. Look, when you're not lifting this exactly, I know he doesn't jump a ton, but even if you jump,
I know what you're saying. There's a muscle sequencing to it, and it didn't look. Yeah.
Exactly. The timing of the ball coming off your fingertip, that muscle memory is absolutely locked in to your jumping and what your peak jump is on your shots. And if that's not the same, the timing of your release is different. And the ball ends up front rim, back rim, whatever it may be. It's not the same. It looks the same now as it did Luka, like at his best earlier this year. That's a big deal, man. He's making that shot to such an extent that he's now a threat from there, and it opens up other things for him. So that's one thing. Another thing that's happened, man, the timely shooting. And look, Derek Jones only took 4 shots in this game, but he makes 3 for 3 from the 3-point line. Like, he's not known to be a 3-point shooter, but the supplemental shot making they're getting because of when they're selling out Minnesota to the paint and they're letting these guys shoot and they're making them pay just enough. And PJ Washington's been sensational pretty much the whole playoffs, but they're getting those timely shot making. And then the final component is we're in tight games now. This is why we wanted Kyrie Irving. This is one of the most talented offensive players of his generation. And now and also a clutch player. And now we've got him to help take the burden off Luka. So it's not Luka, every possession down the stretch, every shot, every play that has to be made. That's way too much to expect of any player. Now to have a guy share that burden with the shot making in particular, man, now you got Luka fresher when it has to happen in the fourth quarter. He looks like he's feeling better physically. And these two guys are humming, man. And look, 40 shots, 66 points. That's almost 1.6 shots per field goal attempt. It doesn't get better than that in a big spot in the playoffs with a chance to go to the finals. And to play that well, that efficiently offensively, it was absolutely special what you watched in Game 3.
On your point about Derek Jones Jr., it goes back to what we were talking about in last week's Old Man of the Three, where you need 7 guys. You need 7 at the very least neutral players. You can't have multiple weak points.
Right.
And the timeliness of role players stepping up, it's something we've seen throughout these playoffs. And I think if you look at the history of the NBA, it's something you'll see throughout. I think you could argue one of the reasons Denver lost to Minnesota was because in their losses, the role guys didn't play great. You can certainly talk about Denver looking gassed at times, but if a couple of those guys have big games in those losses, it's maybe enough to offset it, and they end up winning that series, right? And so, Luka and Kyrie were spectacular, but it was a number of other guys stepping up, having big moments. I think a concern, and I don't know. Sorry, I have not gotten an update today on my phone, so maybe it's out, but maybe it's not out. You called this early. I don't know if it was right at the end of the regular season or very, very early in the playoffs, but you called this early, this sort of two-headed monster of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, essentially giving you the production of a tier 1 or tier 1A, tier 1B starting center. And both those guys have been so good. Yeah. So I think there's a little concern, I think, if Lively can't go for a bit in this series, or if this, whatever the next sprain is, or if it is, a concussion, I don't know how they're sort of phrasing it beyond a neck sprain. That is a concern for sure. And I think both those guys have offensively given them a lift, even when they don't score. And I'll point to one thing. Let's talk about Luka's pick and roll coverage. And this is where I think just them as vertical lob threats matter. Luka's pick and roll. Minnesota has mixed it up. They played a ton of drop some games. They blitzed him some games. Game 3, they mixed everything in. Luka, because of his size, can make any pass. And the thing that I think he does better than anyone is the late pass when he goes up for a shot. And so if it is a drop coverage situation and he's down there in the paint, you've got the vertical lob threat with Gafford and Lively. So you're not going to get the overcommit from Rudy Gobert. And then PJ Washington guy hid in the corner, Derek Jones Jr. guy in the corner. When Luka goes up to shoot it on that pull-up jumper, right, as a defender, you're not going out towards the three-point line. You're coming in to rebound. That your body momentum, it might be a little shift, but that little shift matters, right? Because I've got a vertical lob threat. I may need help on that. I may need help on rebounding. You're coming in, and then he kicks it out to PJ. He kicks it out to Derek Jones Jr. He has done it a ton of times, and obviously he's out for the season. He's done it a ton of times with Maxi Kleba. It's that little thing that he does, and it's the fact that at any point in time, if Gobert steps up just a little bit and Gafford and Lively can get behind, he can make that late pass. The late pass with Luka is such an important part of his game. It's
look, man, we know that he had the one last night that with the left-handed little scoop underhand lob that he threw to Gafford, which defies logic. He had no angle to make that pass. It didn't look like there's any way to get it there. You've got a huge impediment in between you and Gafford, a shot blocker jumping, and he just threw that ball so self-assuredly that exactly where it had to be with his left hand. So that's the one that's going to get most of the attention from Game 3. JJ, I thought he had like 4 of those in the fourth quarter of Game 2. He threw one of the most ridiculous passes I've ever seen in that game, and I don't think they even made the shot. I think they missed the 3, but got an offensive rebound. He went down the left slot of the lane, all kinds of traffic in there. He jumps in the air as if he's going to shoot, I don't know, maybe a left-handed shot at the glass or something. Guys jump. He threw a left-handed jump, like a hook pass to the right wing on a rope. Do you remember that? It was PJ Washington. And like Minnesota, the defenders landed and they weren't even sure where the ball was because he threw it through this little window in the lane on a rope to the opposite wing for a guy and it hit him right here, by the way, right here, right where we would want it as shooters. I think they missed that one, but he had 2 or 3 others during that stretch. And I'm just going, what are you supposed to do when you feel like you've defended this possession really well, man? You're getting this guy funneled into traffic. This is going to be a very difficult shot he's about to attempt. And he rewards guys on his own team at the very end of that by timing it perfectly. Right when there's a final commit. Okay, gosh, I guess I got to go for this. When they're, Gobert and Towns, these guys are backpedaling and they're waiting and waiting. It's like, okay, he's going to shoot it. Now I jump and now he finds somebody behind you. It's demoralizing. And what it does, JJ, it creates so much doubt and hesitancy in your mind as a backline defender when you're supposed to commit. And most guys that you're playing against don't. By the time you get there, they're shooting the ball. They're somehow getting this ball up on the glass, and you're trying to go get it without fouling them and try to contest it or block it. And with Luka, it's different. your mind is not clear to go release to go get that ball because you don't know exactly what he's about to do to it if you go commit to that. He's going to make you pay. It's special, man. It's a big part of who he is as a player. I don't know if you just said you think he's the best you've ever seen at it. He might be, right?
The late pass.
Not many guys even
I didn't say he's the best player ever. Don't. I didn't say he's the best player ever. I said
not best player. Not best player. I said best at that particular thing. Yeah. Right. I mean, I don't know who we even compare him to that you can think of. Great playmakers. LeBron's pretty good at that too. But like Luka, I feel like this is a huge part of what he's waiting for you to do. LeBron, I felt like some of those are more improvisational when they just played great defense. It took away his shot attempt. He can find a guy like Luka. I feel like is moving the chess pieces on you. He's waiting for that commit, knowing where that ball's about to go. And it could be a pocket, a lob, or a cross-court kick out. Doesn't matter. Whatever it requires, that the open guy is going to get it. It's just the way he makes you pay, man, for anything like that defensively at the last second is just, it's like the ultimate final weapon for your possession. And Luka's got the cards because he's able to make those kind of plays.
And it's not just Luka that they've double teamed and blitzed. They've done it to Kyrie as well. And I think it's important to note that these guys, Luka, I know he was this year, and I 100%, 99% certain he was last year. But for most of his career, I would venture to guess he has been one of the most blitzed and double teamed players in the NBA. Kyrie, of course, is a vet. He's faced double teams and blitzes. The thing that they understand, and Luka with his size, I think, is sort of a cheat code because he can sort of make any pass. But they understand that sometimes just passing creates a downhill effect to then get an open shot versus holding onto the ball too long versus trying to find the pass that leads directly to a shot, right? It's that chess match that they're playing when you decide to double team. And both those guys, it hasn't been perfect in this series by any stretch. I think at times Minnesota has done a good job when they have blitzed or double teamed these guys. But I think that's where the evolution for Anthony Edwards is going to come into play. And maybe we see it in this series. Maybe he figures it out in real time. But throughout the next 3-4 years, like that to me is maybe the biggest growth point for him. Sometimes, when he's gotten doubled, he's been passive. Sometimes he's turned the ball over. He had several turnovers last night. So I think for me, that's the growth with Anthony Edwards. Yep. We saw Devin Booker go through it in 2022. Yes, 2022 in the Dallas series when they just blitzed the shit out of him in games 6 and 7, and they ended up losing that series. I thought it was a good Anthony Edwards game. I liked the aggressiveness. How would you sort of evaluate his game last night, particularly coming off games 1 and 2?
By far his best game of the series. His mentality was right. His aggressiveness was right. He was also able to make plays he wasn't making earlier. I think what I saw out of him last night, at least, was not an acceptance that I'm looking at a really crowded lane. And I felt some of that, particularly in the first game, where it just like, man, this looks like it's really crowded in there. It's almost like a 1-2-2 type setup here. 2 guys elbows, 2 guys on the block, and 1 guy on me. Like, I just don't see a lot of room to go in there and make plays. And he wasn't trusting his acceleration to get in there and use his athletic ability to figure it out once he got there. He seemed very reluctant. And as a result, 75% of his shots were threes off the dribble. And that was a win for Dallas. That's exactly what they wanted. I thought in game 2, he had a really rough shooting night. He had some balls that didn't go in, I think, that he's used to making. So last night was by far his best game. But still, the fact that it still feels like he had 9 assists in the game. It doesn't feel like he could consistently operate against a loaded defense. And if that's what it took to be able to make everybody better, to loosen everything up, he's going to be able to do it to that extent. And then he can go get you buckets late and like settle matters. And that's the difference in tiers of player in this league. Anthony Edwards is one of the best athletes in the league, and he's added a lot of refinement to his game. He's on his way to getting there. But when you look at the way that Luka can operate in those moments and it doesn't matter what defense he sees. It doesn't matter how crowded it is, or you trap me, blitz me, go under, switch. Doesn't matter. I got something in my bag for that. I've got a club in my bag for this shot. And Anthony Edwards, it still doesn't feel like he's quite there yet. That was his best game of this series. Give him credit. He showed up. He had some guys, had disappointing offensive performances around him that really didn't give them a chance to win. But it's still not on the level of what you're seeing on the other side.
Yeah, much more aggressive driving the basketball. I know the one play that I remember thinking in real time, he caught it on the right wing, and his defender had kind of opened up a little bit, and the low man was early. I want to say the low man was Luka, and then there was a shift from the strong side corner. And I remember thinking as he caught the ball, I'm like, oh, he's another crowd. And it was just a hard drive, and he had the little up and under through two defenders and finished. Like that, there was a lot more of that. Whereas, previously in this series, there was way more settling for the jumper. I want to just like try to figure out what is going on with Cat. I mean, is it more than he's just missing shots? He's 4 for his last 32 from 3, and a number of them, I think the vast majority of them are catch and shoot threes, right? So it feels like sometimes maybe it's just the ball's not going in, and then because the three's not going in, I think he's forced a couple drives and taken some really tough sort of off balance runners, and then there's like a snowball effect to that where he just ends up having these bad shooting nights. But to me, the whole thing with him has always been his ability to space and catch and make catch and shoot threes, and then the rest of his game builds out from that.
Yeah, listen, man, I don't care what level player you are. You're an all-star caliber talent like Karl-Anthony Towns, or you're a role player, or you're the MVP of the league. It doesn't matter. When you go through an extended period of time where you're not making shots, particularly shots that are like, in your repertoire and a big part of who you are, it starts to get between your ears. And you can't tell me that that's not something to do with this. Because when you go up to shoot and you're feeling pretty good, or you're feeling normal, either way, like your average baseline, or you're really in a rhythm and you're feeling great. We know how that feels. That's like a euphoric feeling for anybody who's trying to make shots. When you just know, like it feels so good. I just have to get my right arm free, and that's a great chance of going in. And it's great when we get those waves, and we all have experienced the other side of it, where you're going through a tough time making shots. It gets between everybody's ears a little bit. I think it's in his head a little bit, and mainly tied to the 3-point shooting. So as a result, the rest of his game's not feeling natural to him, because that is a big part of who he is. It's a big part of what they need in this series with the way they're playing Anthony Edwards. There are shots to be had in the perimeter. He has labeled himself like the greatest shooting big man in history, like that self-proclaimed thing that he threw on himself. So it's a huge part of his game, to what you just said. It sets up the other stuff for him, the straight line dribble drives, because he loves, when he's made a couple threes, he loves that catch, show, and now close out the defender, and it's like 2 hard dribbles in a straight line. He puts his left shoulder into you and powers through to the rim for either a shot off the glass with touch, or a 3-point play, or whatever. Get to the line. When that shot's not going in as much, all of it feels now, he's less confident in all of it, because that sets up his entire night. I was just, and funny, I didn't go back as far as you did. I'm just looking, 3, 4, 22 in this series. You said 4 for what, 32? Is that what you said?
4 for 32.
Like 4 for 32. And if you go back to 2 games before that, it's 7 for 41. I mean, we could just keep on going. It really goes all the way back to game 3 of the Denver series. Since then, this is what it's looked like every night. And not getting out to quick starts, man. Like, you feel for a guy going through it when he shoots that first one. We're all thinking the same thing. If he misses that shot, it's like, oh man, like, here we go. And that instant pressing that you feel, because he wants to have an impact, man. I want to have an imprint. I want to help. And it's snowballing against him the other way. So I think if there's any way to overthink it, he probably is right now. He talked about it after the game, all the reps he's getting, all that. I know. Sometimes, man, I don't know about you, JJ. Sometimes when I got into a legit shooting slump where you just didn't feel right, yeah, sometimes you can rep your way through it. Other times, I needed to go home and just forget about it for a day and watch some film of me making shots, and not about the reps. just look at that and that visualization of the ball going in and all that stuff. It's such a psychological part of the game. And I think right now he's struggling with that. I really do. I think it's really affecting him. He needs to make one or two in the first quarter, and he could have a different night.
What a beautiful segue, Tim. What a beautiful segue into Boston, Indiana. Because I think when you think about the early jump shot going in, I think that was one of the big takeaways for me from Game 3 of Celtics Pacers, is that Jason Tatum made his first 2 jumpers, and then I think he made either 3 of his first 4 or 4 of his first 5, and finally had the jump shooting game, because he's had a lot of Jason Tatum games. Like he's been. We talked about it on Saturday, right? But he made shots early. And he ends up with 36, 10, and 8, just a monster performance. There was a lot to get into this game. I want to touch on the Pacers, but as it relates to the Celtics, did you watch the game? Did you watch the broadcast? I don't know if you watched the broadcast.
I did.
About halfway through the third, Boston had made a run to cut it to 12. It goes back up to 18 in the third. And the point I made was, there's zero resistance. They're a step slow on their help. Like guys were dribbling against Derek White and Drew Holiday and not getting any resistance until the rim. Like, I have not seen that from Boston. And then they had 4 straight possessions where they got block shots, and all of a sudden, the flip switched, or the switch flipped, and it was like a different team defensively. Just the pressure, the force, the resistance, all of those things. And when it came down to it, Tatum has the big night. Al Horford hit 7 threes. But for me, it felt like a lot of these intangible plays were being made by Drew Holiday and Derek White.
Yeah, no doubt. And including that's one of the best defensive plays you're going to see a guard make, that Drew Holiday made at the end of that game. The anticipation that he had on that play to jump that, and like, because he didn't just like absorb the contact in his chest and then like take his offhand and like flick the ball away. He moved both feet over. Both feet got basically on the opposite side of Nembhard's body in the direction exactly where he was going, to where he just sort of hits this brick wall with his head and his shoulder into Drew Holiday's core, because he was positioned perfectly. And then he just takes his hand and flicks the ball away. Like, incredible play. Look, and there, we can get into what did Indiana do there. They rebound the ball with 7.1 down 1. Like, what do you want to do here? You don't have Halliburton on the floor. Who knows how you're going to process that? So Nembhard didn't take it to a great place. There's no doubt. But that is an incredible play with his anticipation. And if he's even a half a count later, Nembhard probably gets the angle on him, where now Drew Holiday's susceptible to riding his hip and fouling him if he's taking that thing all the way to the rim. There's a good chance that could happen. But instead, he never even let it get to that point by jumping in front of him and making that play. You're right, though. Their ability to clamp down, they were down 8, 2.5 minutes to go. And just go look at those possessions. Yeah, you could look at them. Indiana got stuff up on the rim, and you're hoping something goes in, and it kind of felt that way to them. Like, man, they're trying to hold on for dear life by getting something to go in. Meanwhile, Boston, 3 by Tatum. The pass he makes to Horford behind the back, the bounce pass, on the move to the left corner. Incredible pass. Horford hits the 3. And then Drew, of course, with the 3-point play. And it's like they're making these plays, and it just felt like, man, they're just trying to survive this if they can without their floor leader on the court. And ultimately, Boston's defense and their big shot making was the difference. And I look at Indiana and the way they've played in this series. To be down 3-0 is almost cruel when you look at Game 1 and what happened yesterday. It's cruel, and it's one of both of these series, 2 of the closest you're ever going to see to be 3-0 each, and that's kind of where Indiana's at. And this feels, I think, even more hopeless for Indiana, just from the standpoint, like, all right, even if you're at home, even if you win a game, then you go back to Boston and get closed out. Like, for Minnesota, feels like, man, we've been in these games. We are capable of, if they could just have a worse shooting night, their 2 best players play the same game, we win a game, we at least get to go home for a Game 5. Now you can push this thing to 6. Like, that's kind of where you start thinking. For Indiana, it was like they had to get Game 3 to really make Boston feel something. And now They don't feel anything. So I think it'd be likely that Boston finishes this off.
Yeah. The Derek White play, you're talking about getting shots up on the rim. The Derek White play, and I don't think he gets credit with anything other than maybe on second spectrum a test. But Siakam goes right and has a good angle to the rim, and White comes over low man help side and gets this late contest, and it alters both the trajectory and the release point of Siakam's shot off the glass. He misses it. There's a massive play late in the game. And look, I think you brought up how bad you feel in some ways for Indiana. Like, it's sports. Like, you certainly can have empathy for a team that has played their asses off to be in games with chances to win at the end of these games, and to be down 3-0. And look, if there's a timeout, if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't dribble the ball off his leg, they probably win game one. Like, Jaylen Brown hits a ridiculous shot. You know, they can't score at the end of the game. There's no telling whether or not they score if Nembhard calls a timeout, or if Rick Carlisle calls a timeout when he gets that rebound. But it's amazing how we can have hundreds of plays throughout a game.
Yeah.
And in the aggregate, we get down to the very end, and we can just we want to point to one or two plays, right?
Right.
By the way, Rick Carlisle's football formation to get Neesmith that shot to tie it, I'm stealing that one. That was
no. That's going in the memory bank. No question about it. You know, one last point I want to make on this series, and you look at Halliburton and the difference, and look at their 3-point shooting numbers: 5 makes, 22 attempts. The reason is because you don't have someone out there orchestrating their offense where he does. And it's not, he's a threat for sure, but it's more than that. It's his size to be able to come off and drag and now get it back to the middle to Turner. And then maybe there's one more pass to the opposite wing as they rotate to Turner. Like, that's a very hard pass for TJ McConnell to make. TJ McConnell, as well as he has played, not shouldn't say well, as great as he has played throughout the playoffs, the pressure he puts on you is more like downhill into the paint, probing around his little pull-up shots, or from that spot finding a kick out 3, right? Or like a hit a cutter along the baseline. He's good on that one. But to come off a ball screen high and now be able to get the ball back to the middle, he's just a smaller guy. It's harder. The arms are longer. Like, Halliburton can come off of that, kind of throw like a hook pass over his head, over the top of an outreach dunk.
He uses the jump pass too, but he doesn't do it. He uses the jump pass like Luka too. He just does it in a different way. You know, Luka will just jump to pass, but Luka, as I was talking earlier, I was talking about specifically where he looks like he's going to shoot, and at the very last second, he makes a late decision to pass. Halliburton, to your point, he will come off a high ball screen. As soon as there's 2 on the ball, he will jump. And then look at Turner, look at the corner, look at the wing, and can make all 3 of those passes. The size is, but look, you have to, I would say this, you have to admire what Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell did in that game.
Admire's not
without their all-NBA guy
Yeah.
to step up the way they did. Oh my God. You couldn't have asked for more. You couldn't have asked for more.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I was watching most of that game with a friend who's a diehard Sixers fan, and loved TJ with the Sixers. And so it's like torture watching TJ play this well for Indiana, man, because he's, to be in games with this much significance and to play the way he has, and it's not just a moment or here or there, it's every night. Like, the way the Knicks never corralled him. He's kind of doing the same thing in this series. No, those 2 guys were incredible, man. But you're not winning games where you make 5 threes in modern NBA, like 22 attempts. They got outscored by 33 points at the 3-point line, 46 attempts to 22. And some of that is because Halliburton creates all kinds of extra opportunities, I think, for their perimeter game and for guys to be threats from out there. Just the nature of the way he plays and his size and length to get the ball places a little bit more on time out of those situations where he creates 2 on the ball. And that's, to me, was what was so glaring about what they're missing. That threat is not really there for them right now. And it's really tough, man. You make 5 threes in a playoff game. in 2024, that's tough because you're giving up double-digit threes just about every night.
It's so funny because throughout the broadcast, Doris and I would look at each other because Joe talks about math all the time. Joe Mazzulla talks about math all the time and shot profiles and sort of managing the game within that. And there were multiple times sort of as the second quarter progressed and the third quarter progressed, and we looked at each other and we'd get the box score, before the timeout was over, and we look at it and be like, man, if you're Joe Mazzulla, like, you're happy with this shot profile. You're happy with the amount of threes you're generating versus what you're taking, or what the amount of threes the other team is generating. They won the free throw game again. So you've won the 3-point game by a margin. You've won the free throw game, and yet it still was a 1-possession game because Indy outside of game 2 of this series, they just have a unique ability to score the basketball at the rim, to score the basketball in the paint. They are going to hammer that again and again. And look, that gives you a chance to win, and it has given them a chance to win throughout these playoffs. It's just a tough calculus when another team is outscoring you by what Boston has done from the 3-point line.
I was just going to say real quick, at the end of the day, man, for Indiana, it's unfortunately however this goes, whether it's 4 games, 5 games, whatever this ends, and Boston gets to the finals, it's going to be just one of those situations where, man, it's going to sting because of the way that some of these games have played out late game. But at the same time, I think they're going to go into the summer knowing, man, we're closer than we thought. And that's going to be a good feeling for them to take with them. But first, look, they got to finish them off. And not going to be shocked one bit if Indiana were to somehow win game 4, force us back to Boston. I'm not going to be surprised by that.
Neither am I.
And so,
I will be headed to the arena in about 3.5 hours. Tim, always a pleasure. Before we go, while we were recording this, I just was checking my phone for time. While we were recording this, it was announced that Bill Walton lost his battle with cancer and passed away. So I just want to take this opportunity to send my condolences to the Walton family. Of course, I know Luke and Richard, who is part of our team and family here at 342, is very close with Bill. So we just want to extend our condolences and our thoughts and prayers. Bill was a unique man, a legend in the basketball game, a legend outside of it. And we're very sorry for this loss for everyone.
Echo everything you just said. That is terrible news. You feel for the family. Bill Walton is one of the icons of the game and a former colleague. I mean, Bill Walton used to do some NBA studio coverage with me. I was blessed and fortunate enough to be on the set with him. I remember the first time it happened, you can't even really believe you're sitting out there with Bill Walton about, to break down the NBA because of the weight that he carried, the energy that he carried in every room, every conversation, very positive, upbeat person. And like I said, one of the true legends of the game. So I echo everything you said, man. Heartfelt condolences to the family.
All right. This has been another Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler. Legs, appreciate it.
Thanks, JJ.